History doesn't just tell us about events. In the whispers that echo in the dark, it reveals humanity's beliefs about how the world works and what people are willing to sacrifice to hold on to power or to simply survive. In this chapter, I will take you beyond the splendor of the throne to the silent rooms that left no names in history, only shadows. What happened to the emperor's concubines after his death is not just a tradition. It is a dark reflection of ancient fears, politics, and spiritual obsession. This is not only a dark story. It is a mirror that shows how even the love of power can silence the purest love and how women were condemned to rituals from which they could never escape. Imagine yourself waking up to the echoing bells of the Forbidden City, sharp and cold like the winter wind. The ruler of all under heaven, the Son of Heaven, the Emperor, has died. His breath has stopped. The wheels of power have already begun to move behind locked doors. Ministers whisper, guards are replaced. Soon, a new ruler will ascend the dragon throne. But in the depths of the palace, among the silk-draped corridors and golden courtyards, another story unfolds, one you have probably never been told. What happens to the emperor's concubines after he dies? Do they gain power, fade into the shadows, or are they led to a much darker end? You are about to step into a world where love is an illusion, power is borrowed, and death is sometimes a necessity. Before we begin to delve into the depths of these forgotten stories, if you enjoy learning about the secrets and dark events hidden throughout history, liking and subscribing to this video will allow us to explore the cold and eerie labyrinths of the past together. By sharing where you're listening from in the comments, we can form a connection on this mysterious journey. In China's imperial past, the fate of these women was not written by love or inheritance, but by tradition, superstition, and absolute control. From forced human sacrifice to lifelong imprisonment, a concubine's journey did not end when the emperor died. It often began. To understand why, you must look into the heart of ancient beliefs that saw the afterlife as an extension of earthly glory. The rulers of early dynasties like the Shang and Zhou believed that death required an army of companions, not metaphorically, but literally. The emperor, just as in life, would need his servants, guards, and consorts in the afterlife. This belief gave rise to the gruesome practice of Shunzang, accompanying the deceased into burial. Women chosen from the harem were either executed or forced to commit suicide to serve the emperor for eternity. In some cases, they were buried alive. Imagine yourself standing in those silent, gold-plated rooms. Your beauty or your having been chosen in the emperor's eye could be your death sentence. And yet, for those who were not chosen, fate was not freedom, but bondage. These concubines remained locked within the palace walls, living a life bound by mourning and obedience. Their youth and desires faded behind the red lacquered doors. Their very existence became a symbol of loyalty, sacrifice, and imperial power trapped in time. The empress, if she had produced an heir and remained in favor, was generally exempt from this fear. But even she was swallowed by ritual and duty, her soul rarely her own. In some tombs, like those of the Han Dynasty, a hierarchy is seen even in death. Grand mausoleums for the emperors, separate but ornate tombs for the empresses, and silent, anonymous graves for the countless concubines and servants who never left the palace. These rituals were never consistent. Some dynasties demanded blood, while others merely demanded silence. In the Shang dynasty, archaeologists discovered the tomb of Lady Fu Hao, a concubine who was also a general. Her tomb was magnificent, filled with jade, bronze, and ivory. But what shocked the world was the 16 skeletons buried beside her, servants chosen to serve her for eternity. In the Zhou dynasty, this became even more violent. When Duke Mu of Qin died, 177 people were killed with him. The records do not hide it, they condemn it. All this was not just for the emperor's comfort in the afterlife. It was about control. It was to show that even in death, the ruler's absolute will continue. His women, his servants, his advisors, none could escape his reach. Over the centuries, imprisonment replaced brutality. Confucianism, while standing against the slaughter, replaced death with isolation. Widows and concubines were kept under lock and key, stripped of their families, their future, and their names. They were a symbol of chastity, trapped not in coffins, but in time itself. As we embark on this journey filled with centuries of forgotten pain, remember that behind every ritual, every edict, every gravestone, there was a woman who breathed, cried, and hoped. Their stories were rarely told, until now. You have seen how the ancient world demanded blood to honor a dead emperor. But over time, even death began to lose its grip. Above all, there was one man who changed this. You have heard his name, Qin Shi Huang, China's first emperor. The one who unified a nation, feared nothing, and built his own eternity. But even he was afraid of the world after death. Instead of sacrificing hundreds of lives, he commanded the creation of something unimaginable, the Terracotta Army. Thousands of life-sized figures of soldiers, nobles, and horses, shaped in the cold hands of clay, were buried in the dark belly of the earth to protect him in death. A kingdom beneath the soil, silent and frozen. The horror once built with blood was now replaced by the dead silence of stone and clay. But even death offered a momentary pause in all its horror. The real nightmare was rising behind it. Qin Shi, his son, did not share his father's vision. The dark pages of history whisper. He returned to the brutal tradition and ordered all of the deceased emperor's childless concubines to accompany him to death. No heir, no value, just a deep silence and the cold breath of death. What was even more terrifying was that to ensure the secrets of this great mausoleum remained buried forever, the artisans who built it were also sealed inside alive. They dug a kingdom and then vanished in its dark belly. Yet the wheel of fate was turning. When the Han dynasty rose from the ashes of the Qin, a different voice began to echo, an echo of the human that questioned the madness. Emperor Gaozu refused to follow in the bloody footsteps of his predecessors. In the shadow of early Confucian thinkers, he moved the empire away from mass sacrifice. The old ways were not only impractical, they were dark rituals that destroyed humanity itself. During the reign of Emperor Wu, the sage Dong Zhongshu went even further. He wrote of mercy, of ethics, of the sanctity of life. For the first time, these words resonated. Executions in the name of the dead were questioned. Slavery was debated. Ritual sacrifices were condemned. The silent acceptance of the death of the palace concubines was now halted. The tombs had changed. Where living bodies once lay, there were now terracotta musicians, ceramic servants, and symbolic oxen built of clay. Silent and dull, but a symbol that whispered of progress. Still, the shadows of the past continued to wander the palace corridors. Even when a king named Liu Yuan ordered 16 of his servants to die with him, Emperor Xian took away his family's titles, sending the message, no more blood for tradition. However, for the imperial concubines, escaping death did not mean escaping the chains of control. After their emperor was gone, they were exiled to isolated rooms in the depths of the palace. Their names were erased from the pages of history, their future sealed. They would never remarry, never leave, never return to the families they had once left behind. Instead, they waited for the tombs of the dead. For days, for years, they walked among ghosts. They burned incense for an emperor they once served and would continue to serve until their last breath. The silence was bondage itself, but even this service was seen as a privilege. In some dynasties, a spiritual alternative emerged, Buddhist or Taoist monasteries. But for a concubine, becoming a nun was not salvation, just a different kind of cage. Remember Wu Zetian, the only female emperor in Chinese history. But even she was cast aside before she seized power. She was sent to a Buddhist monastery after the death of Emperor Taizong, a silent exile. But she climbed back up, step by step, first as the concubine of the next emperor, then empress, and finally ruler. Most concubines, after entering monasteries, were erased from memory. They lived under vows of silence and celibacy, stripped of their titles, their voices, and their worth. The state provided only the bare minimum for their survival, never for them to matter. In time, these patterns became law. Neo-Confucianism elevated the chastity of widows as a national virtue. Women who mourned forever and looked at no other man were considered pure, noble, even sacred. Lifelong imprisonment was not just policy, but morality. There were exceptions, brief sparks of rebellion during civil wars and dynastic collapses, but these were rare, almost accidental. For most, the emperor's death meant lifelong imprisonment. Yet this was not the end. Not yet. Before the final transformation of the harem system, China would once again pass through fire under the Yuan and Ming dynasties, and the old ghosts of Shunzang would rise again. You might think the cruelty had ended, but history does not move in a straight line. The old ways sometimes return. The Mongol Yuan court saw the roles of women differently. Widows could remarry and even join the emperor's family. But in 1368, when Emperor Hongwu founded the Ming dynasty, he not only drove out the Mongols, he declared war on their culture. In his quest to rebuild pure Han Chinese values, Hongwu revived a darker legacy, Shunzang. The ritual death of concubines returned, but this time, the splendor of the ceremonies had absorbed the blood of the tragedy. When Hongwu died in 1398, many concubines and palace officials were chosen to die with him. Their names were not recorded, their voices were never heard. And his son, Emperor Yongle, who built the magnificent walls of the Forbidden City, continued this horrific tradition under his father's shadow without hesitation. As he passed away, 16 concubines were silently torn from life. Among them was Consort Gong Xian, once beloved, once powerful. History recounts her last moments with chilling detail. Her pleas, her tears, her finally hanging herself with her own hands to prove her loyalty. Even in death, she had no freedom. The stone walls of the Forbidden City echoed with arguments in the silence. Sages, palace officials, and Confucian thinkers argued that such cruelty was incompatible with civilization. And in 1464, a broken emperor made a courageous decision. Shunzang was now forbidden forever. But a different kind of imprisonment awaited the concubines, not freedom. They were no longer killed, but they would be imprisoned for years among silent walls and golden bars. The afterlife had turned into the shadow of a captivity. When the emperor died, the concubines were exiled to remote, windowless corners of the palace, cut off from daylight, from the new court, and even from history. Isolated, forbidden to remarry, forbidden to return to their families. Their names were slowly erased from memory. The Forbidden City became like a prison, a tomb. The women who once graced its halls remained as silent ghosts. When the Qing dynasty rose, the old traditions survived for a while. The Manchu rulers also took inspiration from this system. But when they gained full control over China, they standardized isolation. Empresses could still shine with limited power. Women like Empress Xiaozhuang navigated court intrigues with a silent and deadly skill. But the majority, the childless, low-ranking, and forgotten women, were condemned to a cruel future. Concubines exiled to the hidden corners of the palace after death spent their daily lives in ritual, isolation, and repetition. No visitors, no children, no return. Preserved in luxury but devoid of meaning, they became living ghosts. Consort Jing from the Fuka clan was a symbol of this silent tragedy. She entered the harem of Emperor Qianlong late and had no child to solidify her status. When Qianlong died, she silently watched the rise and fall of emperors. For over 40 years, she lived an obedient and invisible life. When she was finally accepted by the court, she was honored as Dowager Consort Jing, the last living link to an emperor who had been dead for half a century. But she never left the palace. Her body was nourished, but her world had ended with his death. This is the cruel paradox of imperial women. They were pampered, honored, and adorned with silk and jade, but only as long as they served. After the emperor was gone, they became mere memories, kept alive because of who they once pleased, not because of who they were. The weight of their silence was indescribable. These women were not just ornaments, but thinking, dreaming, surviving beings. They were imprisoned in a system that demanded obedience instead of identity. For centuries, history passed them by without notice, without love. But this does not erase their importance. We must look more carefully, feel more deeply, and ask harder questions. As you watch these forgotten lives on your screen, ask yourself, was this loyalty, or was loyalty the only tool they had left? What would we do if our lives were not our own? And if power demands such sacrifices, was it truly magnificent? The footsteps still echo in the palace walls. Their names may have been erased, but their pain, their stories, and their legacy have not been erased, because now you have heard them.